Hello everyone, Secretary Deb Haaland here to kick off today's program for the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation's 2021 Capitol Hill Ocean Week. This is one of my favorite events to enjoy during my time serving on the House Natural Resources Committee. I hope you all are finding it as fulfilling as I did. Today, I'm coming to you from the ancestral homelands of the Anacostan and Piscataway people, and of course next year I hope to see all of you in person. The ocean connects us. It drives critical life-sustaining systems across the globe, provides food, impacts climate and rainfall patterns, and helps fuel our national economy. As a child, I spent many hours near the ocean on both coasts. Sometimes my dad and I enjoyed the ocean through walks on the beach, and other times we relished in the ocean's bounty. Those experiences remain constant in my belief that we will always benefit from a healthy ocean. Not everyone thinks of the Department of the Interior when they think of the ocean, but Interior's Blue Portfolio is managed by several bureaus and offices that are committed to conserving and restoring coastal and ocean resources. We're focused on powering our economy through investments in advancements like the development of offshore wind, which can provide a sustainable source of clean energy and good-paying union jobs. The career experts at Interior actively work on coastal ecosystem restoration, rehabilitation, remediation, and reclamation to maintain the health and vitality of our coastal resources and the communities that rely on them. I don't have to tell anyone at this event, the resources in our Blue Portfolio also serve as nature-based solutions to our climate crisis. The ocean absorbs heat from human-caused warming. Wetlands create natural barriers to more frequent and intense storms, and healthy coasts help all who rely on their resources to thrive. To boost our nature-based solutions work, Interior has joined in the launch of the Biden-Harris administration's America the Beautiful initiative. It's a historic call to conserve 30% of our lands and waters for the benefit of all people by 2030. The vision is inclusive and collaborative. It's about supporting locally led and voluntary efforts to conserve, steward, and restore lands and waters on local, state, tribal, and private lands, while increasing access to our beautiful outdoor spaces for all communities, especially those who have been historically left behind in the conservation story. Tribal sovereignty will be a North Star for this effort, starting with engaging tribes on the care and management of public lands and waters, because traditional knowledge is invaluable as we address climate change and protect our oceans. Each of us has a responsibility to future generations to care for our Earth and leave behind a livable planet for our children, grandchildren, and future generations. As we manage our ocean and its boundless resources, I am committed to working closely with Congress to ensure the President's budget priorities for conservation, clean energy, and environmental justice are at the forefront of our work. I want to extend my gratitude to the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation for hosting this event each year, and to my friends on the House Natural Resources Committee and the Subcommittee on Water and Oceans and Wildlife for the work you do to protect our beautiful oceans, waterways, and coasts for future generations. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of Capitol Hill Ocean Week.
Welcome to Capitol Hill Ocean Week. It's so great to be here with all of you. In the state of Washington, we know how important it is to consider justice and equity in our federal oceans policy. The Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary is a key example of this, where the inclusion of tribal knowledge and values are critical to conservation. The Olympic Coast serves as a reminder of why we need to fight to protect our oceans and our marine habitats. These are old-growth forests, abundant fisheries, productive streams, beautiful beaches, and of course, our orca whale population, all in the Olympic Sanctuary. It is truly a national treasure. Long before the sanctuary existed, tribes thrived in these unique coastal ecosystems. Tribes have been leaders in the conservation effort across the country, and tribes' inclusion ensures that traditional knowledge and cultural values are central to the stewardship and preservation. So we need to grow opportunities for tribes in our sanctuaries, our fisheries policies, and our efforts to combat global climate change. Diversity and inclusion must also include oceans that are in our urban centers, what we like to say, urban oceans. That is where our cities meet our coastlines. And these urban oceans, like Puget Sound, impacted by population growth, pollution, and loss of important species like salmon, are very important issues that we need to address today. We must invest in the next generation of scientists. We must expand our K-12 system programs for fellowships and opportunities for scientists who can lead in these important ocean areas. We need programs like the Sea Grant Fellowship, which are critical to making sure that the future oceans workforce reflects the diversity in the communities they serve. So I want to thank all of you for your dedication, for your hard work, and congratulations on another important Capitol Hill trip and visit to Oceans Week and these important public policy considerations. Good luck, and I look forward to hearing from all of you.
Thank you for the opportunity to deliver a message to this convention of committed ocean activists, scientists, and policymakers. I especially appreciate this year's focus on justice and equity, a lifelong priority of mine, and I appreciate that. As chair of the Natural Resources Committee, I've come to appreciate the critical role oceans play in this climate equation. With ocean climate action, we can protect coastal communities and ecosystems from the dangerous symptoms of climate change, capture and reduce greenhouse gases, and achieve justice for underserved communities. At over 300 pages long, my legislation, the Ocean-Based Climate Solutions Act, is the blueprint for how to deal with the issue and address the issue of climate change. Throughout, we maintain a commitment to environmental justice by ensuring that underserved communities, communities of color, tribal and indigenous communities have equitable access to resources and opportunities. The bill waives prohibitive matching fund requirements throughout, including a Bureau of Indian Affairs tribal resilience programs, and contains a title addressing climate in the territories and freely associated states. And I added a manufacturing fee on virgin single-use plastic to fund important conservation programs, reduce marine plastic pollution, and disincentivize the production of plastic, which disproportionately impacts vulnerable communities throughout the globe and in our coasts. And as we confront the climate crisis, we must make sure our policies are solutions for all. Everyone needs to be included, and no one can be left behind. Thank you for your contribution to the Ocean Solutions, your commitment to continue this and to seek within it equity and justice for all communities so that no one is left behind. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good, productive convention. Thank you a lot.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us. My name is Russel Smith, and I'm joining from the ancestral homelands of the Piscataway people. Many thanks to Chris, Shannon, Ben, and the rest of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation team. I'm very excited about having the chance to spend the next hour with this esteemed group exploring opportunities for federal policy to deepen justice and equity. I spent more than 2 decades working for the federal government on various environmental and natural resource management issues, and I remember many discussions about improving federal workforce diversity, fostering environmental justice, building mechanisms to include impacted communities and peoples in the decision-making process that impacted their lives. But how much progress did we really make? We are here again talking about these very same issues. Today's climate does feel different. The scope of the discussion is broader. Diversity and equity and inclusion and justice, and more profound and more intense. Are this year's CHOW and the conversations that we are having emblematic of genuine change? That we won't be back here again having these discussions in 5 years? I hope so. I want to believe so, but I also have a sense of deja vu. If we are on a path to change, the federal government is going to have to be a part of it. And today we're going to explore what the role of the federal government might be in in fostering and supporting this change. How can it help to manifest real change? We've heard some ideas from Secretary Haaland, Senator Cantwell, Representative Halva, excuse me. But I also think that we have a great panel here that has some varied and extensive experience working on ocean-related resource management issues with the federal government, and some who've helped to give BIPOC communities a voice in planning and decision-making that impact their lives. And I think that this panel will offer some ideas, some thoughts on what it is that the federal government needs to do to truly impact and deepen justice and equity. To start the discussion today, I think it would be helpful to hear from some of the panel about some of their experiences working on resource management issues and trying to ensure that the interests of BIPOC peoples are addressed. Then maybe we can talk about some of those changes that are necessary to tackle some of the issues identified, and about how we might integrate solutions into federal policy to deepen justice and equity. Les Burke, you spent 33 years in the U.S. Navy as a diver, you've taught, and now you've founded Junior Scientists in the Sea and are nurturing some of the youth who will soon become ocean leaders. Can you share with us some of the challenges you faced concerning equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice in the ocean space? Has the nature of those challenges changed over the time that you've been engaged?
Hi, Russell. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here at CHOW today. I will tell you that the biggest challenge is always funding. Back in the early days, Junior Scientists in the Sea, or you'll hear me refer to it as JSIS, was actually founded in 2005. For the first 14 years or so, I funded it myself. A lot of that was because of how complex it was to be certified as a 501c3, and then everything that it took after that. But I did find that there were a few private entities that were interested in helping us, because the reality of it is we were doing things, not where we still are. We are reaching into not only kids on the coast, but kids in inner city Baltimore, kids in all of the nooks and crannies that could be even remotely interested. Again, though, it was getting adequate funding. Some of the labs, Moat in particular, did give us funding. This was after we were certified as a 501c3. But the reality of it is, and this is as frequent and as reasonable in a reasonable amount of time as right now. I'll just give you an example. I am a member of a board of a local coastal advocacy and protection group here in South Florida. That board was given $5 million for coral restoration and outreach. I didn't know anything about it. The money was completely gone before I even knew that the funds existed. And this is within the last month. And let me reiterate something. I am a member of that board. And so this problem has not been fixed, not over the past 20 years, 16 years. It still exists until we figure out how to grapple with that and how to make essentially to put some consequences for not looking around and seeing who's not here in the room. Then this issue is going to continue to happen.
Thank you, Les. Appreciate those thoughts. Joe Altman, if we could talk with you next. You're a Nez Perce tribal member and currently serve as a deputy program manager at the tribe's Department of Fisheries Resource Management. You have extensive experience with issues at the intersection of treaty fishing rights and federal and state decision-making on resource management through a variety of institutions, including the Pacific Fishery Management Council and the Pacific Salmon Treaty, and from being engaged in Columbia River and Snake Basin fisheries management and restoration. Will you talk a little bit about how issues related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice have impacted you and your work, including concerning efforts to ensure that salmon and other stocks have been harvested sustainably and the interests of tribal members are respected?
Thank you and good morning. My name is Joseph Altman. I am a seventh generation descendant from Chief Lookingglass, who was one of the Nez Perce leaders who signed the Treaty of 1855. In this treaty, the tribe reserved and the United States secured, among other provisions, the permanent homeland, as well as the exclusive right of taking fish on a reservation, as well as right of taking fish at all usual custom places off reservation in common with citizens of the territory. The salmon resource reserved by tribal treaties provided for an abundance of harvest that came from an ocean environment and river systems that were biologically functional and fully productive. Around treaty time, Chief Lookingglass had this to say about our future. Our children's children, those yet unborn, the future generation, even though they can be confined on a reservation, the ancestral lands that had provided our needs and will continue to do so only if our rights to hunt, fish, gather roots and berries were intact. He had me and others in mind when he stated that. As time has passed, we've seen how accurate it was. Much has changed since the mid-1800s. The modern Northwest, with its massive irrigation, hydropower, and storage systems, was built on the backs of tribal people from the 1930s on. Through the use and destruction of the lands, rivers, and fisheries we have lived with for thousands of years. Today, unfortunately, we are at risk of losing our salmon and steelhead populations to extinction, given their poor survival in recent years due to a combination of bad ocean conditions, barriers that operate in migratory corridors on mainstem Columbia and Snake rivers, among other natural and human impacts. This has created inequities and social injustice that is just too numerous to list here, that others may not be aware of, as those relate to our foods and livelihood. As salmon go, so go the salmon people. Tribal members have higher rates of unemployment, higher poverty levels, lower per capita income than U.S. general population. As such, this current economic system and the status quo approach to salmon in the Pacific Northwest compounds and increases these disparities. Now is the time for this nation and the region to treat our needs as a paramount objective to achieve. We cannot wait another year and certainly not another generation or two for the U.S. to address the salmon and climate crisis that we are facing now. The tribe is encouraged by the focus on JEDI as it relates to development of U.S. policies. The following is our version of it that we believe can help center tribal interest into any policy that may be developed, or as the Honorable Secretary Deb Haaland put it a moment ago, be the North Star that can be used. Justice to us is about the U.S. government and its three constitutional branches and all executive agencies honor and fulfill the constitutionally protected treaty obligations they have to the Nez Perce and other Northwest tribes that have federally recognized treaty rights, and ensuring that all relevant laws, regulations, and policies support and conform to those treaties. Equity to us means that Indian tribes and their tribal members receive benefits from the rivers, the environment, and natural resources of the Pacific Northwest, and not bearing a disproportionate or unequal burden of salmon conservation or that of climate impact. We have not had salmon to support us. We have had lands that no longer are productive or waters. And all this needs to be changed to once again allow our people to thrive in our homeland. In a moment, I will provide some ideas on what solutions we think should be considered to get us to a better place. Thank you for that opportunity to provide those remarks.
And thank you, Joe, for beginning to lay out some of the issues, some of the consequences of current practice and its impact on the livelihoods, the lives of your people. And look forward to having you lay out some of the solutions that you have in mind, and fostering a discussion about how we might engage some of those integrate some of those into federal policy. Um, Takoli Kapp, you've been involved with the subsistence community for all of your life, first having been raised in that community, and then as an employee of the North Slope Borough Department of Wildlife Management, where you are currently serving as the director. Will you talk about the impact that the federal government's management of wildlife on the region has on Indigenous communities and how that impact is shaped by issues of inclusion, diversity, equity, and justice? What are some of the ways the federal government can change to address these issues better?
Okay, thank you, Russell, for that question. And Ublalotak, my name is Takoli Kapp. Inupiaq, born and raised in Utqiagvik, Alaska. I've been with the department for over 30 years. For those that are not familiar with Alaska, the North Slope Borough is similar to a county government. And our jurisdiction covers the entire northern part of Alaska, about the size of Minnesota, adjacent to both the Beaufort and the Chukchi Seas, and includes 8 North Slope communities. And the vast majority of the people of the North Slope are Inupiat, and we depend heavily on the subsistence harvest of a variety of species, including the bowhead whale, caribou, ice seals, polar bear, and migratory birds for our survival to maintain our traditional way of life. And in my role as the director, that I've been involved in a number of different co-management groups, whether it's at the international, domestic, or local level, to ensure that we have conservation for the species that we depend on, and that we have a seat at the table. So for your question, I think it's to understand the impact on Indigenous communities. First, you have to understand the important role of subsistence and the challenges we currently face as Alaska Native people. For those in the listening audience that aren't familiar with the subsistence lifestyle, it is how Alaska Native people have survived for thousands of years. We are blessed to continue this way of life to sustain our families, and our future is bright. Where I come from, grocery stores are few or non-existent in some of the smaller communities. It's in our smaller communities, they don't have meat department or fresh produce that exist in our smaller communities. And the goods can cost 3 to 4 times higher. I went to the store yesterday and a gallon of milk was $12.99, and 2 T-bone steaks was $43. This is not sustainable for our people. Instead, we view our oceans and land as our grocery store, where we can harvest our subsistence resources to sustain our families, our elders, and our communities. At the same time, we recognize the necessities and realities of the modern world. As I stated, I work for the North Slope Borough, and our people depend on the revenue from oil and gas to fund our operating budget. And this board that I work for provides services and infrastructure to support education, police, fire, and search and rescue, and employment for our people. Yet it is the people of the Arctic, of the United States and Alaska, are the forefront, we feel the forefront of the effects from climate change, which is impacting the sea ice, which is the foundation for the marine mammals that we subsist off, the permafrost that holds up the infrastructure for our homes and facilities, our coastline, and the increasing Endangered Species Act proposed listing of the species that we depend on to feed our families. The existing federal management structures are not designed to address and accommodate these unique tensions and issues that we are experiencing in northern Alaska. Federal management is mostly driven by policies derived from Washington, D.C., or management agencies are based on established statutes, which are largely species or topic specific. And those policies are not a part of our customary and traditional hunting practices, so they seem foreign in some cases. Just in general, I just want to highlight that wildlife management in Alaska is very complicated. On land, we have both state and federal management. One is managed by the Alaska Board of Game through the state. The other one is through the Federal Subsistence Board. For marine mammals, it's individual species managed, depending on the agency. For bowhead whale, it would be the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission with the co-management agreement, the Alaska Nunit Co-Management Council, and so on. And it's very complicated. I've been doing this work for over 30 years, and I still don't have a full understanding of all the rules and regulations our people are expected to follow. And, we have people and hunters and providers from our communities that need to provide for our families and our communities. And I know that they will hunt to provide that nutritional and cultural well-being to our people. You asked about, what are some other things that could help improve? And I basically have three things. The first, that there must be recognition of Native people. I truly believe that this is the root of many of the challenges that we face. In many agency decisions, Native people are treated like any other stakeholder. We submit comments like other members of the public and propose agency actions. And the comments from entities representing the affected Native people are not giving any additional substantive weight or consideration by the agencies tasked with making those management decisions that affect our land, our water, and well-being. In contrast, in Canada, the affected Native people have a seat at the management table and are directly involved with those decisions that impact them. We have had several decades of user-to-user or hunter-hunter agreements with our Inuvialuit counterparts from Canada in managing polar bears and belugas at the grassroots level. And it's very evident the difference between how Alaska Natives versus the Inuvialuit in Canada are being treated in management decisions when we are at the table. I was at a meeting recently that involved circumpolar countries, and it was only the United States that didn't have an Indigenous person at the table with the head of the delegation. And it wasn't until a day and a half later I was asked to sit at the table, and I felt offended, and I did not. But I think that there is opportunity for us in the future to build these meaningful relationships with Alaska Native peoples and Native peoples across America. The second recommendation is the engagement of affected Native people must be meaningful. I know that currently the federal government must consult with federally recognized tribes and Alaska Native corporations on policies that have tribal implications, and that the required federal consultation has mostly devolved in ineffective meetings, exchange of letters, and written comments. And it often feels like, at least in Alaska, that we're a checkmark in the process. And I know that there have been efforts to make improvements, but we need to do something now. There must be more attention and consideration given to engaging, soliciting, and respecting our direct experiences, our local knowledge and observations, and opinions of Native people directly impacted or affected by the proposed federal actions. Because it is our backyard, we have the most at stake, so we need to be recognized, going back to that Native recognition. And then my last recommendation is federal agency actions and decisions provide for local management. And basically that way too often wildlife management decisions affecting our people have been directed by Washington, D.C., the politics that's happening, the perceptions and the bureaucracy. We have seen harvest quotas imposed on our people on species based on Western science. But we knew deep inside that the science was not adequate, or the methodology that they were using was not adequate, or did not consider the local knowledge as best available information. And we have a couple of good examples. One is the bowhead whales and the work that was done in the 1970s when they were counting whales. It took years of discussion and building trust to earn the relationship with between the hunters and the agency people who were counting whales. The other one is the recent Chukchi stock of polar bears and the population estimate, them utilizing the Western science in their modeling, but not taking into consideration local knowledge. But working together, we actually accomplished that, and we have a very solid population estimate that includes both Western science and local knowledge into the models that were used. So that's what I wanted to share with you. And it really feels like, in my experience, that we're always trying to fit into someone else's box. That whether it's the Board of Game or the Federal Subsistence Board, but really our people were the first conservation people to make sure that our resources were sustainable and that we are able to feed our families. So thank you.
Takoli, thank you so much for sharing both your frustrations and some of your suggested solutions, and highlighting the importance of these resources and the consequences of not having good coordination, good engagement with the federal process on managing these resources, not having more control. I do hope we can get into this a little more deeply as we continue this discussion today. But
Great.
let's turn to Nahal Gogai, who is currently the Environmental Justice Manager at the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission. I know that you have more than a decade's worth of experience advancing environmental justice and ecosystem protections, and have made a career of working to overcome barriers to achieving an ecosystem protection in a way that embraces equity, justice, diversity, and inclusion. I was hoping that you could help us understand a little bit what some of the barriers to achieving that balance, the engagement, the inclusion of Jedi in your work and in this decision making has been.
Yeah, thank you, Russell. I'm very happy to join this virtual CHOW from ancestral homelands of the Ohlone people. The list of barriers is unfortunately much too long to share on today's panel, but I've decided to highlight the top two most common barriers I've encountered as my work as a environmental justice or EJ advocate and community liaison. For me, the first barrier that comes to mind would be the issue of inaccessible communication. Government agencies that are hoping to incorporate environmental justice principles and practices into their operations must tailor their language to this audience of mostly community-based organizations, indigenous peoples, and frontline community leaders. Government planning and funding programs all too often use technical jargon, wonky policy language, and other exclusive communication strategies that are detrimental to the goals of meaningful community engagement. In my work liaising between government and communities, I spend a lot of my effort on translating jargon-heavy community planning documents and reports into more community-centric language that focuses on emphasizing the points that might be most relevant to this audience. Community-centric language reflects an understanding of specific histories, needs, and priorities of these communities. The current one-size-fits-all approach, which doesn't acknowledge the often hyper-localized EJ histories and cultures and indigenous cultures, not only feels irrelevant, but it is usually inaccessible to the communities that we all might be hoping to engage. It's our job as public employees to connect the dots and ensure residents are not only aware of the projects that their tax dollars are funding, but that they're also clear on how they can directly benefit from these projects, whether it's through public comment, advocacy, or through direct funding opportunities. So this gets me to the second most prevalent barrier that I want to share today, which my co-panelists Les already spoke to, and that's funding. You can't talk about environmental justice unless you have, or JEDI, unless you have funding available to compensate communities for their participation in these conversations. In my role as EJ manager at the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission, I've committed a percentage of my time and often work after hours on funding development. In California, the majority of public funding can't go to community stipends, nor towards the types of things that foster environmental justice community engagement, such as childcare, transportation support, and refreshments at meetings, to name a few. I was hired to help BCDC develop an implementation strategy for our new environmental justice policies, and I knew I couldn't do this in a meaningful way that follows our new environmental justice and social equity guiding principles without including community advisors to guide me and guide the agency in this process. I would not recommend developing an advisory group of environmental justice or tribal representatives without some sort of funding available first to show that you honor and respect their time as experts. As agency staff, we have full-time jobs and salaries covering our work, but community advocates and community representatives do not have that luxury. At BCDC, we're fortunate to have a relationship with Resources Legacy Fund, which is a private foundation that's invested in environmental justice development, our environmental justice policy development and implementation. And they funded a group of environmental justice advisors, which I coordinated in my previous role as an independent consultant, to be active participants in the co-development of BCDC's EJ and social equity policies. And we recently launched the next phase of this partnership with RLF by recruiting 6 EJ advisors who will be fairly compensated for their advice and guidance on our implementation strategy. And on the flip side of the funding coin, you also have the funding needs of the government agencies that are working on implementing these new social equity and environmental justice policies and processes. We at BCDC have added multiple new requirements to our permitting and planning work, but we don't have the funds needed to hire new analysts who have backgrounds in community engagement or to fund existing staff time to participate in the necessary trainings needed to conduct these new requirements correctly. So as we add more requirements to our programs, we need to think about how we can support ourselves as coastal zone management agencies to follow up on our EJ policies and racial justice statements with intentional plans for thorough and thoughtful implementation that can have long-term meaningful impacts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nahal. I really appreciate your comments, and you sort of highlighted 2 things that also have been touched on by some of the other speakers, and look forward to going back and exploring a little more about how we can address the issue of local control and local impact, and how we can better integrate that into federal policy and legislation. And yeah, of course, funding is crucial, and as you rightfully suggest, it is crucial not only to get the work done, but to let those know who are engaged that they matter and that their participation has a value. Joe, I was hoping you could help us talk a little bit, think a little bit about ways to change federal legislative and administrative policies to address some of the issues that have been described. Reauthorization of the Magnuson-Stevens Act is on the table. I wanted to ask you if there are better ways in which MSA could be changed to better support principles of JEDI. I also wanted to note that you are one of very few, if not the only tribal member of a federal regional fisheries management council, which is kind of central to the way in which the Magnuson, which I can't say, so I shouldn't say kind of, which is central to the way in which MSA works. I was wondering if you could in your remarks, speak to what your role there is and how broader inclusion for tribal members might impact the way in which the fishery management councils do their job and impact the way in which JEDI can be incorporated into federal policies.
Thank you. So I'll certainly try and address that question, but also within a broader scope beyond just the MSA. So there are 26 tribes of the West Coast that have federally recognized fishing rights in the states of California, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. There are 20 tribes in Western Washington. There are 4 tribes in the Columbia River Basin, which in Nez Perce is one, and there are 2 California tribes that are part of the MSA and the Pacific Fishery Management Council. The tribes retain co-ownership and co-management authority over natural resources within usual and custom areas through treaties, and they do play a critical role with federal and state governments in managing shared marine resources. Tribes can be seen as the salmon leaders, the salmon stewards, and the salmon managers, bringing knowledge, science, and experience to the entirety of the ecosystems that salmon rely upon. The MSA holds some promise, as it is the primary law that governs marine fisheries management in U.S. federal waters. The MSA fosters the long-term biological and economic sustainability of marine fisheries. As you mentioned, the Pacific Council is the only one of 8 U.S. regional fishery management councils that includes a tribal representative at the table, and I serve in that capacity currently. As a voting member, I have responsibility to serve as a knowledgeable and experienced trustee of the nation's marine fisheries resources, being careful to balance competing private or regional interests, and always aware and protective of the public interest in those resources, as well as to uphold the provisions of MSA and other applicable laws, such as treaties. Some coastal Washington tribes conduct fisheries in the ocean, and other tribes have fisheries that occur in rivers along the coast or inland. The rapid change underway in the Pacific Ocean, coastal and inland landscapes is disrupting our traditional food systems and food security. The interest of Nez Perce is in using MSA, along with the other federal legislation and laws to fulfill treaty rights and meet the needs of our membership. Time to do this may be even shorter as climate warming advances and restoring the lower Snake, among other areas, to a naturally flowing river that connects fish to cold, high altitude, near pristine Snake River Basin habitat is exactly what is needed for the best possible ecological resilience to warming temperatures. As tribes, we do recognize that the following suggestions may be scary to some, but if we as a nation can muster the same resolve for salmon as we are for addressing a global pandemic like COVID, we can truly get through this together and not have the tribes be left behind, as is common. As a global leader, the U.S. should reduce the causes of climate change. The U.S. needs to work with other countries and nations to reduce atmospheric emissions of carbon dioxide, which is the root cause of climate change. Relative to the MSA, it will be helpful to empower and fund the following areas directly to treaty tribes. Improve the survival and resiliency of salmon steward across their full life cycle and geographic range. Improve the resiliency of tribal communities to disturbances in fisheries through adaptation and climate-ready fisheries. Providing mitigating resources and infrastructure as we transition through these changes we are experiencing, and which we believe will only intensify. As a more direct approach from the federal government to Indian tribes, they should rely upon treaty rights as the supreme law of the land, as a centerpiece for congressional and White House administration policy, legislation, funding, and action. For instance, the tribe has long approached restoring the lower Snake River by breaching the 4 dams and investing in local communities that could be affected by such action. Recently, Congressman Mike Simpson of Idaho has presented a Columbia-based initiative proposal that could provide a pathway to meeting tribal objectives and needs, investing in affected local communities, and to go far beyond that in charting a stronger, better future for the Northwest. Similarly, the Biden administration can provide time-critical leadership for salmon and river restoration in the Northwest that ensures that funding is set aside at this critical ecological juncture to restore lower snake and other areas important to tribes as a cornerstone to justice and equity. This may also be an opportune time to adapt or reform federal policies to better align and support treaty and trust obligations that the U.S. has to tribes. For instance, the MSA, the ESA, the Clean Water Act, NEPA, and the Marine Mammal Protection Act should individually and collectively be implemented so as to fulfill treaty obligations rather than having treaty rights be bent and contorted around them. It is easy to regulate treaty harvest by federal agencies who implement these laws, but they should also regulate the development and other economic engines of particular regions so that all are being held to the same standard to get us to salmon restoration. When taken together, this JEDI approach has the potential to produce desired outcomes of healthy and harvestable runs of anadromous fish and healthy ocean and freshwater ecosystems. The U.S. needs to commit all of the resources necessary to increase capacity and support tribal efforts to sustain their fish communities and ecosystems in the face of climate change and at a time when salmon are in free fall towards extinction. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, and for laying out those ideas and for I think some meaningful call for some changes to approach and to various legislation. Les, you've done a lot of work on getting young folks interested and engaged in cultural issues, and I was hoping you might talk a little bit about what's so important about it and how it advances equity, inclusion, diversity, and justice. And also perhaps you can share some thoughts on how federal legislative and executive policies could be changed to further the work that you're trying to do and to support greater equity, inclusion, diversity, and justice.
First of all, Joe, I love that bolo. Okay, you got to get me one of those. Okay, we'll talk about that after. That's really a great bolo. You know, folks, we've hit on a lot of issues here. There are things that have needed to be said. Nahal, you hit a home run. Okay, communications. What needs to happen needs to get from the Congress people, the legislation, down to the street level. Okay, and I think that's where the disconnect is. That's where we're missing. Every one of the panelists here, especially the tribal issues, we're in inner city, we're speaking to what is happening at the street level. Okay, those acts, you know, they're not getting there. Let me give you an example. I was out in front of the National Aquarium in Baltimore, and with a family. I work with kids, and one of the parents threw a can of soda. It hit the edge of the trash can and fell on the ground. He actually was walking away. His child said to him, "Dad, you can't leave that there." Okay. Father looked at it, picked it up, put it in the trash. Okay. What just happened? All right. So what we're talking about is how to get that person to care, because quite frankly, it was obvious he didn't care. And there are 100 other examples, you know, and I hate going in this direction, but I think we would all agree that George Floyd was the most influential person in 2020. Okay, what does that have to do with this? Okay, there was a police officer who was the street level bureaucrat that was on his back. And we know where the rest of that went. Why did that happen? Because he didn't care. Okay. Since George Floyd, 150 police caused deaths happen. Okay. Why did that happen? Because the people that should have been paying attention to that message don't care. They're not there. Okay. The people who should be listening to this message, don't care. They're not here. Okay? That's what we have to correct. The message, but not only the message, the messenger. Okay? I mean, the reality of it is we need to make this stuff cool. We need to make science cool. Okay? You never see a scientist or an ecological person with a Nike shoe deal. Have you? No. But here's a reality. Get this on the camera. This is a shoe too. Quite frankly, so is this. Okay, so we need to not only change the message, we need to change the messenger. All right, how do we get people to care about this stuff? All right, and even the process, there are old processes that are already in place. A very, very smart woman said to me the other day that we are not using all of the knowledge and background that we already have. Why aren't we using restoration processes that we're using for the forest in the ocean? Same kind of deal, but we're not. The same messages, but we're not. We're not doing it. We're not putting this all together and understanding that we have to transmit this to the people who are going to make the difference. Okay? Another gentleman I know just very recently said, the problems that we are facing today are not going to be fixed by the minds who created them. Okay? We need to change those people. Okay? We need to make a shift. All right? And if we don't do that, we're just going in circles. I heard the other day, you know what? This is a good step. Okay? This is a good first step. We've been making this first step for 30 years. Okay? We need action. We need commitment. We need to say, okay, we don't like the way things are happening. Listen to the people that are on the ground. Listen to the tribes. Listen to the people in the inner cities. Listen to the groups up in Alaska. Okay, they're far away and their issues are real, but we're not listening to them. Well, quite frankly, I am. But there are a lot of people that should be listening that are not. So what do? Okay? Have to change the message. We have to change the messenger. There's a video that I asked to be put on this session's page. If you guys get a chance, take a look at it. It's called The Aquatics. And there the messengers are different. There the messengers are young folks. Those people actually were brought together by a group. Some of them had never been underwater before in their lives. In the show, you will see them now diving this. Okay? Some of them, and I hope it's not lost on you, the color, you'll see diving this. Okay? We have to make that change. We have to understand that the messaging and the messenger is the most important thing. The funding will come if everyone is interested, if everyone cares. But right now, there are people who don't care.
So thank you, Ules, for really highlighting and focusing on that question of the messenger and the message, and making sure that the message gets to from the bottom to the top, from those that are actually engaged at the ocean level in activities to the decision makers. I think that's a theme that's been highlighted in various ways throughout the discussion today, and more generally throughout the discussion over the last couple of days at CHOW. I was wondering, and I'm going to throw this out to all of you, whether there are some ways in which local government agencies can help support, elevate Native voices and needs, local voices and needs, whether they're the Inupiat, the Nez Perce, local community, the local communities that are engaged on the water. What are some ideas about how we can elevate those voices to try and achieve the changes that we're looking for? And what are some ways in which that would support JEDI, to use the acronym? Maybe I'll just I don't know, Takoli, do you have any ideas on this?
I think that, because Alaska and where I come from is so far away from where decisions for our people are being made. I think that having people from the DC area come to Alaska to sit down to meet with the whaling captains and the whaling crews and the hunters to talk about the issues that are important to us, to really understand how, they often reference the new Arctic, but we've been in the Arctic for thousands of years, and it's not new to us, and we've been resilient to overcome all these challenges. But more face-to-face meetings for them to come up and to actually see, to feel, to smell, to experience what we go through is very important and key.
Thank you. Les?
I think that's exactly right. It's very interesting that Nahal had said earlier that the language that was being used, and I was thinking, well, the language should just as well be in Chinese. Well, then I realized that there's someone on this planet that could read and understand Chinese. So the reality of it is the language might as well be in Klingon, okay? Because the way the things are written, you can't understand it. But now let's think about what we're dealing with these legislators who won't make the trip up to Alaska, okay? Earlier today, I heard that we have to invest in the next generation of scientists. I mean, how about investing in the next generation of people? Okay, but because before anyone's ever a scientist, they're a person. And if we don't invest in them and grow that person, we're never going to get someone from Alaska to come down and go to school and be a scientist and go back and represent his culture. Okay, so why don't we invest in people and then go from there?
Thank you, Les. Nahal, you're our communications expert, if I might. I want to talk a little bit about sort of communications, local control, how all of that could be improved to sort of foster some of what we've been talking about in terms of trying to get messages up the chain. Or maybe it's not about getting messages up the chain, but getting decision making down the chain.
I wish I was a communications expert because I'd be much better at my job. I think that I want to just speak to what my co-panelist already said, which is very based in developing relationships. So similarly to how we do with our personal lives, this work really requires a genuine effort to cultivate, meaningful relationships with communities. And as you develop these relationships, you will start to understand what type of language actually resonates with those community members or those individuals. Because even if you had, general language that you think will be understood by what they always use as like the 5th grade understanding level, that still might not be relevant. So it really requires you to go into the community and meet them where they're at. It's great to provide a space for them to feel welcome to come to your meetings, but really meeting them where they're at is critical. And this will help address the number one barrier that maybe I should have mentioned in my previous response, which is the lack of trust between environmental justice or BIPOC or other marginalized communities and the government agencies that we might represent or that I represent. And so if we don't come to this work from a place of humility and an understanding of the local communities' histories and the trauma that they've experienced at the hand of our agencies, then the alliances that we hope to build and the engagement that we hope to foster in everyone may never really fully be realized. We do at BCDC, we do have some tools that we're developing to help the more technical audiences understand how critical it is to engage with the local communities, and actually to start implementing the environmental justice policies that we now require of our permit applicants. We have something called a community vulnerability mapping tool, and this does use 12 indicators of social vulnerability that go beyond economic disadvantage. So it's things like citizenship status, vehicle ownership, disabled populations, communities of color, and there's multiple other indicators. And I know that indicators are not the best way to tell a story about a community, but it's just kind of like the tip of the iceberg. It's to start helping these permit applicants, engineers, developers, and restoration scientists understand the communities a little bit better that they're going to be working adjacent to or in. So we use that tool to kind of encourage them to do that. And another layer that we're developing for this tool to help elevate community stories is called a community-based organization directory. Right now it's just a directory, but it will become a mapping layer that will share the information of Bay Area environmental justice organizations and local indigenous leaders. And we are going to be encouraging our permit applicants and other planners that we work with to start reaching out to these organizations and leaders as advisors to their project designs, and to actually for these individuals to serve as the project's communications experts, because they know how to speak to their local communities much better than anyone could ever learn in a school program. So these tools are the ways that we can see ourselves as a local government agency supporting these new relationships that need to start being cultivated, and that will also lead to enhanced communication.
Thank you for sharing that, Nahal. Those sound like important tools, and and perhaps for others to think about in terms of trying to bridge some of these gaps. And it also reminds me of some comments that both Takoli and Joe made about sort of local knowledge and learning, and integrating local knowledge and learning into our understanding, into our decision-making processes. And I was wondering if either of you wanted to talk just a second about your thoughts about how we might do a better job of that. I mean, we have posited that our management at the federal level is based on science, and what I think what we should understand is that's not enough. That's not accurate. Any thoughts on how we change that?
Maybe before Joe, if you don't mind, Joe, I just want to say a few words real quickly. So local knowledge and science to me are both science. The people who have the knowledge of spending years of out in the ice or out in the land with their observations, to me are equal to like the doctorates. But being able to work closely with the hunters and the people that hold that knowledge with the modelers or with the scientists to make sure that they are intertwined together so that the best information is being used to help with those decisions, so that everything is being considered. And a good example was the treaty between the Russian Federation and the United States with the management of the Chukchi Sea stock of polar bears. It called for both Western science and local knowledge. But when they were developing the model to come up with the population estimate, they left out local knowledge. And it was because of the local people knew that that was going to happen. We worked together with local contractors or scientists to make sure that our observations and our knowledge was going to be entwined working with the modeler. And it was a success. And I think more of those types of interactions need to happen. and there needs to be mutual respect and trust between the scientists and the knowledge holders.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Just real quick, Russell, if I may, just on that
Mhm.
note, because, and it's not just the local knowledge, it's the local culture, how people learn, how they perceive things. Okay, that all, you cannot develop a program in DC that's going to work in the inner city. Someone has to come from that area or in Alaska. Okay, quite frankly, Amanda cannot create a program for Shaniqua. Okay, that's just the way it is, and that's the change that we have to make.
Thank you, Les. Joe, did you want to add anything to this part of the discussion?
Yeah, thinking the time I have remaining. To me, I think it's all about bringing it down to the lowest common denominator, and that is human rights and human needs. So we are all about health and well-being and safety, about preserving family and community tradition in the areas that we live, about having food security, especially culturally important foods, as well as having thriving economy with good jobs in the areas and places that we work and live. Thank you.
So, thank you. And we've hit the end of our time. Just want to see if any of you has just one last thing that you want to add before we end. If one, and if you has a closing thought to share with our audience, I think we can run over a little bit. Well,
Okay.
just quickly, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And just in closing, don't get me wrong, that I truly believe that relationships between the federal government and our respective areas, whether you're a tribal member from the lower 48 or an Alaskan Native, is very key. And as I spoke of earlier, that having this trusting relationship, mutual respect, and utilizing both of our knowledge bases is very important. And that together, like I always often tell the agency folks that I interact with, like, you need me and I need you, and we have to do this together. So that's my closing words, and thank you. And I enjoyed being on this panel.
That is a great message. Anybody else want to give us a closing thought? Well, then, let me say thank you to all of you, Takoli, Joe, Nahal, Les. I think that this has been a really great conversation, provided some food for thought, and obviously a conversation that could have gone a lot longer, and that needs to continue, and then that needs to go a lot longer. And thank you to the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation for creating the space for this discussion. I really look forward to seeing folks use this discussion and use this as a way to start to really improve the way in which JEDI policies are integrated into federal policy. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.